Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Peter Maravellis. I want to welcome you all to City Lights. Um, Jody Weiner is a bit of an unsung hero. I mean, not just in San Francisco, but I think, of course, those of us that live in North Beach and are in the literary scene, of course, have known of him for many years, but he's also been like a really huge champion of City Lights. And so we're delighted to be celebrating his new novel, which is called Raise Your Other Right Hand. Whom our dear friend Byron Spooner has described as Nick and Nora Charles meet the Lincoln lawyer in the slam dunk novel. So, of course, Nick and Nora, the Thin Man, I know most of you probably know, some of you might not, but that's what the reference is referring to. Actually, I had somebody ask me about that. But raise your right hand, raise your other right hand. For those of you that read Prisoners of Truth, I mean, you realize he loves to play with like genre, but what he's also doing is he's tackling issues involving addiction, sexual identity, the trappings of fame and greed, and he always sneaks a lot of very interesting ideas into his work. So, of course, Jody Weiner is a writer, attorney, producer, along with Jane Goodall and a bunch of other animal activists. He co-authored the nonfiction book Kinship with Animals, which was an anthology of interspecies encounters. A lot of people don't know that about him, but I want to put that out there. He was also consulting producer and counsel for the award-winning documentary A Conversation with Coco, and also penned the original comedy screenplay Heck No. He currently serves as board president of our dearly beloved Litquake Foundation here in San Francisco. Might I also add that the sequel to tonight's book is scheduled for publication in 2026. It's called Crime Therapy. So look out for that. With Jody tonight in conversation is none other than Scott James. He is an award-winning journalist, best-selling author. His published works include Trial by Fire, Alone Together, and the novel The Sour. His reporting has appeared in the New York Times, The New Yorker, The Guardian, amongst many others. He's also a board member of Litquake and co-founder of the Castro Writers Cooperative, a co-working community for writers. We are going to make room for a Q&A at the end of the evening. So we ask that you wait until I come to you with a microphone. Otherwise, our very dear friends online are not going to be able to hear your question. And for those of you online, you can just drop your questions in the chat and I will bring them out. And Jody will also be signing books at the very, very end. So please join City Lights in offering them both a warm welcome. Gentlemen, welcome to City Lights. And Jody, congratulations.
Wow, this is wild. I'm really humbled and grateful to be here, everyone. So thank you, Peter. Thanks, Caitlin, the rest of the crew here at City Lights, and the foundation for hosting this soiree. And thanks to Speaking Volumes for publishing Raise Your Other Right Hand. Okay, is it close enough? Okay, good. For publishing Raise Your Other Right Hand and agreeing to publish Crime Therapy, my second book in the Krafter series, which I'm dutifully working on right now, in case you're listening. And thanks to Scott James for agreeing to join me in conversation a little later. And thanks to my wife, Nancy Califf. Where is she? There she is. Her influence is significant in this book. The petite artiste whose paintings grace our wall and who graces my life. So her influence is actually significant in this book because she's the inspiration behind the musical side of Lora Krafter's character. Laura's a singer-songwriter who operates a small repertory theater, and Nancy's original song compositions actually appear in the novel. Possibly along with a few of her personal peccadillos, but we won't describe those now. But most of all, thanks to all of you, friends and people, for coming out here and to hear me go on for who knows how long. And if that's not enough, as a reward, you get to buy a book. So it's really a privilege and a dream to be launching my novel here at City Lights. The rich history and the tradition in the house that Ferlinghetti built, the giant figures, the giant literary figures whose ink and rhymes are shelved around us. Yet, fiercely independent bookstores around the country are rapidly becoming endangered species, falling to society's collective ADD. This obsessive need for instant gratification and quick cuts. Today, it's all TikTok and Snapchat. It's all about emojis instead of empathy. And we all know that's what children learn from books. Sadly, according to Pew Research Center, approximately 21% of adults in America, can you believe that? Are about 43 million people have low literacy skills, often defined and described as functionally illiterate. And 2/3 of US families with school-age children did not buy a book last year. I'm guessing that we all agree that the more a child reads, any child reads, the more they're able to understand the emotions of others. Empathy, that word again, it's the new enemy within. Now, consider that in the context of cutting the NEA and all the other federal programs for education. So if you think about it, our support for libraries and for brave bookstores like City Lights is more important now than ever to preserve the First Amendment and overcome these ignorant book bans based on cultural differences over objective facts. So my close friends and my family have been putting up with me way too long about the progress of this book. So I can't tell you what it is and what a relief it is to finally have it out there and be able to show it to everybody that I see. I mean, I really hope that you'll find something to enjoy, something worthwhile in the story. And I'm happy to say that the response so far has been positive this first month. The book is getting out there. But I don't want to jinx things by talking about it too much, because I actually agree with the Stephen Wright philosophy, which is when everything is coming your way, you're in the wrong lane. And, and of course, my favorite is the early bird may get the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. Now, so after spending so much time being someone else's legal advocate, putting their lives and their problems ahead of mine, an event about me, it's truly gratifying when people come up to you and they say, hey, I liked your book, or I'm in the middle of it, I want to find out what happens to the characters. And I guess I'll be okay if people are less than thrilled. I mean, I experienced some of that during my first book, because the fact is, I get it. They're expressing their opinion. It's your art, and people's opinion is what matters when it comes to art, right? And anyway, but in my case, the beauty of it is it's not malpractice, and nobody's going to jail if my fiction sucks. So I guess that after all these years, I've gained some perspective on the glamour of being a writer versus a lawyer. And I got to say that it's far more challenging and it's draining to write something every day than I ever imagined. So here's my author tip number 1. Always carry your new book with you, because you never know. I just sold a copy at the DMV a couple weeks ago. I went with Nancy to get her real ID, and the poor woman sitting next to us failed to get an appointment, and she'd been waiting there all day with her teenage daughter to get her learner's permit. And so she asked Nancy what she was reading, and one thing led to another. And the fact of the matter is that things escalated, and this woman was obviously in a weakened enough state to buy anything to read while she was waiting. So Nancy and I were in and out of there in an hour. So the fact of the matter is, tip number 2, always make an appointment when you go to the DMV. Tip number 3, it's a good place to sell your book. I'm going back there. So I used to think that creating the work would be the hardest part. I mean, making the art is what it's all about, right? Unless your article or a story or a picture is assigned in advance, or your piece is commissioned, You know, thinking about selling it usually doesn't happen until the piece is finished, right? And you pretty much then have to believe it's going to sell itself. Well, then when you're lucky enough to sell a painting or a song or have something published, you just have to be prepared to believe in yourself for the long haul. Because the fact of the matter is, I can tell you now, the competition just to get people to read your book or to look at your work, it could kill you if you let it. So you might as well relax, and this is my theory now, is that you might as well relax and enjoy the journey, because without fixating on the destination, because you do have to show up, and you have to be disciplined enough to sit there with an empty space and do it, especially when you don't want to do it. But if you truly love and you trust the process, I really think, and I can promise you, that you will manifest your work. I mean, the fact is, for me, this book is already a success. I mean, look, I'm here, I'm humble, and I'm just grateful to be here and to have this opportunity. So, tip number 4, if you stick around long enough, you probably will become respectable. So, here's the elevator pitch for Raise Your Other Right Hand. You kind of laid into it a little bit, Peter, because it is a funny page turner. It's about justice and family ties and a twisted road to redemption. So welcome to the high wire world of Archie and Lora Krafter. He's an attorney, happily tending to his lovely wife, Lora. As I said earlier, she's a talented musician, but Laura's also the estranged daughter of an aging West Coast mafia boss, Sal Delacote. Archie is enjoying a quieter life away from the courtroom when all of that changes. NBA superstar, all-star Radon Jaalaba goes missing from a nationally televised Warriors game at the Oakland Arena on Christmas Day after he runs from the scene of a drug-related shooting that kills his intimate friend and a responding police officer. Once he was America's hero on the basketball court, Radon is now on trial for his life, battling addiction and the weight of a career-threatening secret, while Archie's handed the case of his career. But Archie and Lora also find themselves ensnared in her father's notorious family business after her younger brother, Dominic, is accused of money laundering, illegal profits, and he begs Archie to defend him. So the novel asks the question, what happens when you place a drug-addicted athlete, superstar, with a multi-million-dollar shoe contract into an impossibly dangerous situation that forces him to the deepest reaches of his soul? And is the bond between Archie and Lora strong enough to withstand the pull of her wealthy and powerful family when they suddenly come calling? So I'm going to read the first 2 chapters. It's short, so it'll be fine, I hope. And let me start. Chapter 1, Integrity. Hello, Archie Krafter? He turned to see a fashionably dressed young woman navigating through the holiday crowd gathered at this iconic hotel bar, backlit by neon-mirrored shelves stocked with every spirit on the market. Archie was thinking of the smoothest way to tell his wife Lora that their tile contractor was trying to screw them on the sauna conversion in the upstairs guest bathroom. And while this lady's crimson-tinted curls and her big dark eyes were familiar to him, her name and their connection eluded him. You don't remember me? Marina Ramirez? Brian and Susan? She just texted me your number, and here you are. Marina plowed on without acknowledgement from him. Obviously, it was meant to be. Look, I would never intrude on Christmas Eve unless this was important. Archie was waiting for Lora in the Redwood Room, where they traditionally met up following their separate last-minute holiday shopping, surrounded this year by rather subdued crowds in soggy Union Square. Considering Archie's plate already overflowed with other people's problems, he remained disinterested in any new matters not involving his wife, his naked lawyer blog, or their vengeful rescue tabby named Swami. Sorry, Swami. Nevertheless, his former law partner, Brian Martin's spouse, had sent this sinewy siren, so he was slightly curious to hear what Ramirez had to say. Radon's gone missing, Marina said sotto voce, preventing nearby patrons from hearing about whom she was speaking. I'm not a detective. Wait a minute. Radon Jaalaba on the Warriors? Oh, of course. You're Radon's partner. We're going on 8 years together. It's coming back to me. You really aren't a detective. What's coming back to you, Archie? Lora appeared at his side, shopping bags dangling from her nicely toned arms, her timing perfect as usual. Happy holidays, Marina, Lora said as they embraced. We haven't seen you in a while. Is everything all right? I haven't been able to reach Radon in 3 days. I'm worried something's happened to him. Tomorrow evening's game is on national television, Krafter said, his curiosity finally aroused. There would have been reports from practice if anything was wrong. Not necessarily, Marina responded defensively. Did he miss another practice? Don't cross-examine the poor girl, Lora butted in. Can't you see she's upset? Sweetheart, do I ever tell you how to run your charities? Don't be glib, Archie. I'm not, dear. I simply can't get the facts if you interrupt my chi. I hope you don't think Kraftwerks is a charity. Lora, I'm happy the theater almost breaks even. Now that's condescending. Radon is addicted to painkillers and who knows what else, Marina blurted out, apparently unable to withstand their bickering anymore. I have to get him help. There have been rumors for a couple years now, Archie said, reacting like a fan, starting with physical therapy following his second knee surgery. You don't know how much Radon endures, Marina replied. I watch him sacrifice his body every waking minute to play another game. Lately, he's out of control, and he's on the way to destroying everything he's worked for. He has played great the first 6 weeks of the season, Archie said. I'm sure he's been drug tested. Not necessarily, Marina repeated. Isn't there something you can do to find him? Maybe he doesn't want to be found. Oh, hush, Archie, Lora piped in again. What about Mike Prey? It's Christmas Eve, Archie implored her. Mike's a Warriors fan, Lora persisted. He'll know where to look. Mike's a Bulls fan, Krafter corrected her, while handing Marina his business card. Lora and I have to go home and feed our cat. If you haven't heard from Radon by tomorrow morning, let me know. Oh, thank you so much. Marina hugged Archie, and soon Lora was in between them, and the sweet-smelling, desperate beauty was hugging Lora, too. God bless you both, she said, as Archie and Lora finally managed to escape into the rainy San Francisco night. That poor girl needs your help, Lora pronounced, in her way of assessing their future as they walked toward the parking garage, shielded from the steady drizzle under their oversized umbrella bearing the Kraftwerks logo. Withholding his skepticism about Marina Ramirez's bona fides, Archie did not discourage Lora from pursuing her missions once they'd moved her. He drove silently up deserted Russian Hill, reaching the turn into their dead-end lane. You up for one more? Archie asked, having realized that he'd hurried Lora out of the bar before she'd finished her drink. She nodded in approval, and he continued down the north side of the hill. I told Swami we'd be home by 7. He's a pretty smart cat, Lora said, but I doubt he knows what time it is once the sun goes down. Chapter 2. Motivation. Radon Jaalaba hid behind thick manzanita bushes that rimmed the manicured park across the street from Marina's freshly painted white deco apartment building. His head pounded, his heart raced, and his body felt clammy all over. A smothering fear had crawled up his neck and spread to the back of his parched throat in waves, repeatedly choking off the instinct to survive this horror into which his life had just plummeted. After wandering around furtively for nearly 2 hours, in shock, really, Radon cowered in wait for Marina to come home, not knowing where else to go. A rag fashioned from his shirt sleeve was wrapped around the heel of his right hand, caked with blood from the gash he'd sustained while fleeing through the already shattered sliding glass patio door off the dining room in some dude named Alonzo's railroad flat. Having panicked at the sight of his dear friend, Russell Marchetti, lying face down on the grimy linoleum floor with a gaping hole in the back of his head, Radon bolted out the patio and slipped away across the weed-filled backyard. This time, there was no escape. Radon had screwed up beyond his wildest machinations, leaving not the slightest hint of salvation. Whatever faith he'd held in doing acts of selflessness, something his precious mother preached constantly, had just deserted him. His undeniable cowardice had been exposed, and he found himself unable to seek faith in Allah, Buddha, Jesus, or any other truth. For as much as Radon didn't want to think about his mother at this moment, his life had suddenly become a cliche of the American dream. More than anyone else in the world, Lieutenant Commander Michelle Garraway had led the way to Radon's phenomenal success, and she deserved a world of better from her only child. Michelle and her precocious, mocha-colored 5-year-old had come home to South LA at the end of '86. Following Michelle's service with distinction in the Middle Eastern section of U.S. Naval Intelligence. Radon's father, Radon Jaalaba, a Moroccan captain in the French Air Force, had accompanied them to California on a sweetheart's visa. Sadly, though, Ramin could not cope with being house husband to an American female triple threat, a returning local military hero, helicopter mom, and assistant director of communications at the Torrance City manager's office. Ramin had failed to thrive on his own or adjust to what he believed was his subservient role in the family, and eventually he had embarked on his final bender as far as Michelle was concerned. The couple had met at an underground officers' club in Riyadh during the run-up to the Lebanon War. Based on Michelle's fairly fluent Farsi and her computer science skills, she'd been assigned to a big ship monitoring the Persian Gulf. Captain Jaalaba was flying missions to assist the Israeli incursion. He had seriously deep green eyes and forever smiling teeth, and they'd hit it off. Their maiden encounter had blossomed into romantic assignations, eventually filling Michelle's body with radon. Michelle had been raised Catholic and didn't tell Ramin until the end of the 4th month. Even liberated Muslims disapproved of abortion after 16 weeks. She was told to choose whether to have her baby in Saudi Arabia or at the Naval Hospital in Langstel, Germany. Lieutenant Garraway and her future NBA point guard had returned to a set of private rooms inside a prominent Saudi family's Riyadh complex, not far from her new network assignment in a nondescript intelligence office. Ramin was a doting, if not sporadic, father, frequently flying and living cleanly when he was in Saudi Arabia, as far as she knew. Michelle's only hint that Ramin might have had a substance abuse problem occurred the second time he'd arrived from Israel, still buzzing on something he'd snorted with another pilot. Michelle had also flirted with Islam, seeing the influence of discipline through prayer. She'd accepted Jaalaba as her son's surname out of respect for the rainbow of cultures existing within that special boy. And while she'd sworn under penalty of perjury in Ramin's visa application that they were getting married, she had held everyone off, intuiting something wasn't right. Then, on Radon's 7th birthday, during a backyard party for most of his schoolmates, featuring Barney the dinosaur, Ramin was arrested at the local pharmacy, trying to pay for a bogus Dilaudid prescription with Michelle's credit card. It is what it is. It is what it is, Ramin, had been Michelle's simple parting shot. Unless he agreed to promptly vacate her house and find another legal reason to remain in the country, the government might have to deport him. Apparently, one junkie in the family was more than Michelle could stand. And yet, 23 years later, Radon was hiding in the park, terrified, consumed with shame and the disgrace he was about to cast his mother's way. Why did this happen now? Radon stifled an anguished cry at the vanishing Christmas afternoon sun. Just when he'd returned to form, quick as ever off the dribble, a wiser, better player in every facet of his game. He had worked too goddamn hard for the last 5.5 years to heal his blown-out knee. Twice. The pain, too, had been conquered. Well, definitely under control. Then he was slammed in the gut by the haunting vision of Russell's contorted body lying on the patio floor, shot dead while running away from a police officer. Now, Radon wondered, did he really draw a better fate by managing to escape? He knew it was far too late to justify his actions, yet Radon couldn't stop replaying in his head the horrible events that had unfolded during a pit stop on the way to the arena. He'd waited in the car at least 15 minutes, and Russell had not returned from the apartment. When Radon went inside to find him, he was met at the front door by Alonzo's frantic girlfriend. What the hell was her name? Tanya. That's it. She had called 911 because she said Russell and Alonzo were fighting, and she was afraid somebody could get killed. Fuck. Radon's tardy, lame self-examination further sparked his memory, as he had witnessed part of the escalating scenario. Having followed Tanya down the narrow hallway to the living room, he'd seen Alonzo standing in the middle of the room, gripping a baseball bat in his right hand, pointing at Russell with his left, screaming, "Put the gun down, bitch!" Radon had frozen in place as more yelling from outside the ground floor flat turned out to be SFPD responding. And in the chaos, Tanya inexplicably hurried past him down the hall and out the rear patio. He'd started after her and retreated into the kitchen instead, not wanting to desert his friend. Within moments, though, Russell had come running down the hallway with a cop in pursuit, gun in hand, firing 2 shots at him as Radon remembered seeing the patio glass door shatter and Russell literally hit the deck. Radon did not immediately recall that he'd rushed from the kitchen across the dining room, dodging another gunshot, and exited through the patio. But then the face of a second uniformed officer suddenly returned to his mind's eye, coming at him like a 3D movie, having advanced from the outside, firing into the dining room while Radon had barreled through the broken sliding glass door and escaped across the yard. Russell was dead for no good reason. When did he get a gun? Just as the shock was receding, it occurred to Radon yet again how he had stupidly risked everything by going there in the first place. He hadn't slept in 3 days, and if Russell had brought him an eighth yesterday like he'd promised, Radon would have made it through the game today, and none of this would have happened. There she is at last, he thought, spotting Marina's blue Prius approach her apartment building. He slid out from behind the hedges, hurried across the street, and followed her into the ground floor garage. Ever since he was drafted by the NBA, Radon's underwear model good looks and custom wardrobe had been crafted to soften his streetwise swagger, rendering the total package relevant beyond basketball. Truth be told, though, Radon often wondered about that the optics concealed his weakness of character, something just obscenely displayed for the world to judge. Was he destined to follow his father's path after all? "Where have you been?" Marina screeched at wit's end after exiting her hybrid, squeezed in among the compact parking spaces. "Oh my God, you look terrible. What's happened?" They hurried across the deserted garage and ascended the small elevator to her 5th-floor apartment. Last night's rain had blown far down the peninsula, leaving a clear azure sky visible through the living room bay windows, while billowing sails and metallic container ships moved along the choppy waterway inside the Golden Gate. Marina saw the terror in Radon's eyes as they sat facing each other on the sofa. His self-confidence usually bordered on arrogance, enough to turn off anyone unwilling to dig up his vulnerabilities, which, it turns out, were buried not too far beneath his gracefully toned surface. In the beginning, Marina had hopes for them. But now, as the sun sank on this fateful Christmas, she held Radon tightly, steadying his breathing, easing his pain, protecting him from his demons. Then she gently led him toward the bathroom to address his wounds. Strangely, she recalled the first time they'd been naked together, and Radon had sobbed, panicked by the honest tenderness of their emotions. Marina had come to love Radon deeply over the years. Still, the clock was ticking on her own life's fulfillment, and Radon was not the missing piece in her long-term puzzle. Yet, she knew this was definitely not the time to bail on Radon, especially when bailing him out of jail was the realistic agenda. Hold still, Marina implored him, standing over Radon, seated on the lidded toilet adjacent to the marble sink in her bathroom, while she deftly cleaned and bandaged his wounded hand. Alhamdulillah! What am I going to do? The police will be looking for me. Here's Archie Krafter's number. Call him. You saw Krafter? I was worried when you turned off your cell. You need treatment, Radon. Lady, you don't understand how serious this is. A cop killed Russell. It might as well be me. Radon whimpered a little because they're going to blame me for it. At least tell Brian you're alive. Marina punched in his number, already in her phone, and handed it to Radon. He's probably at the game right now. Radon, they're all waiting on you. So before I sit down with Scott for a discussion, there's something, sorry, Peter. There's something I really want to get off my chest about the current state of affairs in our country. And we are here in the Temple of Dissent. So I'd like to read a poem that sums up the best of what I'm trying to say. I mean, I wrote this poem in January 2017 when he became president the first time. I've updated it a little bit, but it still seems pretty relevant today. So with your indulgence. Democracy. America burns and I fiddle in the new year. Who knows what to do when congressional Republicans don't care? I read the transcripts from the Supreme Court rejecting Tricky Dick's executive privilege claim. Powell, Rehnquist, and the Minnesota Twins, his 4 appointees, ordered the blame. An amoral smoking gun covered up a second-rate burglary when truth mattered. They never wanted to kill Nixon. It wasn't tribal then. When the Conspiracy 8 were alive, Bobby Seale bound and gagged before the jury for the Grant Park riots, or was it the Central Park 5? Now it's all political. Obstruction, the whiny little bitch in plain sight, corruption, compromat, and quid pro blah, blah, blah. Brand new swamp rats falling from the heights. No more Mooch, Manooch, Suckabee, Flynn, and Cohn. Liars at law, but no collusion. Now there's Musk, Hedgehog, Vance, and McMahon. Please lift the tide that floats all boats and keeps classified documents in the toilet. Is there a backbone in the House or a Manchurian candidate? Yet nobody is above the law. Convicted felon by a jury of his peers, sexual assault, emoluments, money laundering and fraud, phony foundation, con job college, stakes and fake news, Moscow Tower, Deutsche Bank, and Anthony Kennedy's son. Obstructing, interfering, lying under oath for fun. Lock her up? Goebbels, Gerbils propaganda. Kiss my ass, Kislyak. Polywaddle platform change, but no collusion. Schumer, Jeffries, Booker, and fear the new scum. Is Hope just a town in Arkansas? Karma's a bitch. Where's my Roy Cohn? He died a hideous stiff. Democracy.
Well, congratulations, Jody.
Thank you.
We're going to take a few minutes here to talk about the book. I told Jody ahead of time I really do not want to do any spoilers because there's a lot of twists and turns in this book that I want you to enjoy as much as I did. So Jody and I know each other from serving on the board of Litwig, the San Francisco Literary Festival. And Jody is, in essence, kind of our in-house attorney for the festival, doing very, festivalish things like nonprofit status, documentation, and things like that. But your earlier career, you worked on criminal cases.
Yeah.
And so where does that play into the book that we're reading now, your experiences back then?
Well, I think a lot of it draws from that. In fact, the story of Radon and the double murder, it's a felony murder case that was actually based on a case that I tried in Chicago. Very similar facts. It wasn't about a basketball player, but it was about a robbery of a dope house. And during the course of the robbery, my client did not have a weapon, and he just showed up with his buddy who was going to rip these guys off. And during the course of it, they got into a fight, and the guy in the house had a gun. So they started after each other. The cops were called. And in fact, my client literally jumped out the window, as is told in this book. And when he jumped out the window, a cop from the backyard shot in and killed his partner. And my client was charged with felony murder, which is still the law in a lot of states today. California changed it now so that in order to be charged with felony murder, you actually have to fire the weapon, and it has to be in furtherance of a forcible felony. Oh, sorry. So that's part of the story.
All right, so what happened to this guy that you defended?
He got 14 years. He's probably out now, but he doesn't write me.
So you also, in your career, you defended an ape. We should talk about that a little bit because that's a little unusual.
Well,
Coco, the famous talking ape, accused of sexual harassment. So
yeah, that's true. I actually didn't defend Coco of that claim.
Well, it's indefensible.
Well, it was indefensible. But you know, the thing about gorillas is they live in packs, right? And I don't know if you all know about Coco. She was the signing gorilla. She was a phenomenal experience in getting to actually meet her. We went to her
deposition.
No, we didn't have a deposition, but it stemmed from the sexual harassment case stemmed from the fact that because she was in captivity her whole life, she was found at the zoo, and Penny Patterson, her keeper, was able to get a grant from Stanford to start teaching her sign language, and it actually worked. But as she was domesticating Coco, it's a 350-pound gorilla, and she wanted to be with other female gorillas, and she wanted to be with a male gorilla. So they tried to match her up. Literally, this is in the documentary that I worked on. At one point, they found Coco. They got tapes from other gorillas that were in other zoos around the country and put them on a VHS tape. And Coco picked who she wanted to be her mate. She started kissing the screen when Ndume came on the screen.
So it was like Grinder before there was Grinder.
Exactly,
Wow.
yeah, more or less, yeah. So the upshot of it was that as soon as Ndume came in and wanted to have the gorilla, she'd been so used to being domesticated and living and eating with utensils that she said, no, I don't want to get banged up against the wall. So as a consequence, she wouldn't have sex with any of the male gorillas. So every time she would see other people, she would start signing, I want to see your nipples. So she wanted to see my nipples and invited me to come into the back room. And Penny suggested, no, that's not really a cool idea. But she did the same thing with Robin Williams. And actually, Robin Williams, there's a piece about him where he said, oh, it could be interesting. And he went back there. So, but in any event, that led to...
So that was the harassment.
Well, that wasn't the harassment. There were actually two... female handlers of hers that worked at the foundation, and they lived in a trailer. Coco lived in a trailer on a big property in Woodside, right off of Skyline Terrace. There were 3 gorillas living in this property. It was unbelievable. And we went in there and just were able to go in and sit with her on the other side of this. She lived in like a little trailer, like the Rockford Files used to have. Yeah. And she was on the other side of this trailer with curtains on the window and everything. But the handlers used to come in, and every time the handlers would come in, she would always, because they were female handlers, they would, let me see your nipples, let me see your nipples. And at one point, Penny, apparently, this was what the accusation was, had acquiesced and enabled her by saying, it's okay, show them her nipples. She just wants female companionship. Just wants female companionship. So that led to, at one point, literally, they were on the floor. Apparently, I wasn't there, so I didn't see this, and it never came out in court because the case was ultimately dismissed. But they accused her of sexual harassment because she was accused of, while she had exposed herself, that Coco tried to mount her.
Yeah.
And so the woman quit in a huff, And that was what the lawsuit was about. But I mean, come on, you're working with a dangerous animal. There is a law that says you might want to think that you're assuming the risk that this kind of stuff would happen. So ultimately, the case was dismissed.
Well, the law is certainly odd. Let's put it that way. And
But that's for real.
yeah, no. Look, other things that are real in this book is you have obviously a love affair with San Francisco. There's so many little bits of the city that are there. I mean, one that stuck in my mind was you take us inside the rarefied world of the Olympic Club, but you take us to the time when it was not co-ed. I don't know how many people know this, but the guys there, when it was not co-ed, they would swim naked in that big, beautiful pool with the Tiffany ceiling. So you just imagine this old guys doing laps and flip turns naked in front of everybody. So just weird little tidbits like that about San Francisco.
That was relevant to me because if you remember the scene, that was about the fact that I don't want to give too much away. I don't think it's a spoiler really to say this, but there's the idea that Radon, the main character, his problem with not being able to say anything in his own defense because he didn't really participate in a robbery or anything at this house is the fact that he's in the NBA, and at that time and even today, there's still sort of an unspoken ban against openly gay athletes. And he was unable to express his own sexuality because if he did, he would have lost his job. So that's part of the reason that he's being quiet. Now, I set that scene in the Olympic Club because it's toward the end of the book, and one of the characters was expressing his concern about the fact that he shouldn't be on the team if he's gay while they're in this naked place and they're all naked with a bunch of naked guys. So it's like, how hypocritical can you be?
Right.
So that was the purpose behind it.
Well, I'm assuming you're a big Warriors fan because a lot is there. We're behind the scenes.
I watched yesterday's almost loss. Yes, right. I did, but they won. So yeah.
Well, I mean, I probably have to ask. What is your prediction?
They're going to have to play Houston on Saturday, which is they're a really good team. I don't know if they have the guns to go all the way, but we'll see. I hope so.
I've got on my Steph Curry socks here for those who don't have. So look, besides the city, you have a lot of characters in this book, and I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like these characters are drawn from real people in your life. In fact, it's possible maybe someone in this room may be one of the characters. Talk about that and how you're inspired by your real circle of friends that you have.
Well, I'm looking around, and there's probably...
You don't have to name names.
No, I'm not, I don't intend to. I don't want to. I want to get out of here alive. I'd say there's 3 or 4 people in here that are. Yeah, I mean, really, literally. I mean, obviously, my wife is Nancy. Inspired the Lora character. Not just, but it is amazing though that she. I mean, a lot of you may know that she's a really great musician, and her music in the book, Lora is she runs a repertory theater in Jackson Square, which is there is a theater there, and it was kind of a riff on that theater. And there are apartments upstairs, so if you'll recognize that when you read the book, that you'll see that that's what the theater I'm talking about was, the old Gateway. And so in the book, she runs this theater, but and so she also produces a play during the course of the book. So during the course of the novel, I've been able to wind in several of Nancy's actual musical compositions into the book. So she's definitely the character. And it was really interesting because the second book that I'm right now working on, and I'm about halfway through it as we speak, it's a lot more of the relationship between Archie and Lora, and that was the whole riff on the Thin Man, because I really loved that interplay between Nick and Nora in those old days. And I thought, well, this is something that doesn't happen in books that much anymore, with couples and being, that was my point, was to make it a joyous thing. I mean, I read a part where he's on the run and it seems extremely heavy, but that's probably one of the heaviest parts of the whole book. The rest of it is pretty much, it's comedic, and I think you'll see that it just breezes right along, and hopefully you'll get drawn in by all the characters. But yes, there are several characters that are in this room that are also in the book.
I think of the book as somewhat of a hybrid, because you do take us into songs and lyrics. There's also a blog
Yes,
there.
that's
So why
correct.
did you do this hybrid type of writing? What was your idea?
I was really, I get a couple of reasons. One, because I wanted to make it light, and I wanted each character to have their own place, and that was really important to me. So Archie had his own place, and his motivation was, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I want to write. But everybody keeps drawing him in, and so the naked lawyer is his blog, and it's his way of expressing his opinion. Lora, on the other hand, was that character. She needed to be her own person, and I was able to suck it out of Nancy basically to create this other character. So that was very important to me.
Look, the book is entertaining and delightful. But what do you hope people get out of reading this? Is it that alone that you're thinking I'm going to bring people in and amuse them? What are you trying to? What you sat down? For those of you who don't know who have never written a book is like, especially a novel, it's like a puzzle. It takes forever and ever and ever to figure out where the pieces are going to be. It's a lot of work to write a book. It's a lot of work to write an original piece like this. So what do you want from our readers here tonight?
Well, I'll go back to your last question, and then I'll fill it in. One of the things that surprised me was Jennifer Egan. Is that her name?
Sure.
Yeah.
She does a lot of different styles.
Yeah, well, the book that won the Pulitzer Prize, that book to me was really entertaining. I didn't think it was a Pulitzer Prize winning novel, to be honest with you, but I love that book, Welcome to the Goon Squad. That was the name of it. And in that book, there was a lot of that. She did a lot of stuff that was outside of the realm, the four corners of a regular novel.
Yeah.
That there were things that were like that. That attracted me a lot, and I thought that gave me a wider palette to work with. The first book, Prisoners of Truth, was very, very controlled. And as a lawyer, you learn the discipline and you learn a very structured way to write. And that's very good as discipline for even if you're going to write fiction. But to go from right brain to left brain is not the easiest thing in the world,
right,
because you're responding as a lawyer to what somebody wants. Somebody comes to you with a problem and they go, I have to write a brief. You got a deadline. You have to do it. And hopefully sometimes you get paid and you turn it in. But with a novel, unless it's commissioned, you're on your own. So there is no deadline. There's none of this. And that's what I alluded to earlier when I was talking about it's so much more difficult to sit down there every day and just create on a blank page when you're used to having people come to you and responding. So,
but it sounds like what you learned from your work is discipline.
Yeah.
And so, but now
But that gave me the confidence to then go outside of what was with Prisoners of Truth, so I could actually do experimentation and get a little bit farther out each time. Sometimes it fails, I'm really grateful that you liked it and you get that. There was a review today in the East Bay Times by this woman, Anita Katz, and she got it. It was not. She said that there's more breeze than there is heft. Which is basically, that was it. It was to make a book that people could relate to, but also not walk away feeling depressed. I didn't want to do that.
Well, no, I think it is an entertainment in the truest sense. So what do you want the folks in this room to get out of it? Is that, what do you want them to leave them with?
Well, there are several things. One is that we can, redemption is a very, very difficult but necessary path. And I wanted to show that. That was one of my main themes throughout this book, was that what you heard from Radon at the beginning is not the Radon at the end of the book. He transforms during the course of the novel, and that redemption thing was something I thought was very important. So I want people to take away the idea that you can make a mistake, you can correct it, and you can move on. So that was one of the things I wanted to. And also, I don't want to underemphasize the love affair between Archie and Lora. I think that was also a very important part, and I'm seeing that more importantly in the second book that I'm working on now. It's not the sexiest thing in the world. I mean, you say a love affair, it's sexy. People don't want to read that much about it. You get into romance novels. But if you could put it in the context of real life, which is what I tried to do, to me, I thought the love was really strong. And that's another thing that we don't have enough of that today.
I'm going to open it up to, oh, we got some applause back there. Let's open it up to questions from folks in the room. We're going to get a microphone here so that we can get this for the live streaming audience. I'm going to let you hold the mic here. So you can answer, and I'll just point to people as they... Sure.
Usually takes a few seconds for the gray cells to... Do you? Phantasm. Oh, back here.
Could you give us a little bit of insight into your process? In other words, for those who have never written a novel, and how do you approach it? I mean, in the morning, do you write a certain number of hours a day? Do you, when you're staring at that blank piece of paper, where do you go from there? And do you do any sort of an outline first, or is there an arc of a character?
Well, I try to write every day at some point. If it's not in the morning, most people say that their most workable time is in the morning. For me, I'm so used to being a lawyer, I still haven't completely changed from doing work in the morning when I get up, because there's still stuff coming in, things I do. So it takes a while for me to change from left to right brain, but now I work every single day. I will do anything not to write. So just so you know, this is not, I mean, I don't think I'm the only one who feels this way. I mean, there are so many programs on TV. There are so many walks you could take. There are so many things you could do on social media. You could spend the whole day not writing if you want to. And I've probably tried every single one of them. But every once in a while, it calls you back, and you just have to sit down and do it. And I don't know if there's any specific way to do that. I do know that writing on a deadline is a lot easier than writing without one. I can tell you that.
You know what? I'm going to come around this way because I think that's going to reach.
One thing about you develop a character, but you mentioned in the second chapter about wondering if someone's appearance would sort of obliterate someone's character or fool people. But when you develop a character's character, do they ever surprise you as you go along and you find out that they have had some redemption, and or do you stick to one kind of character?
No, absolutely no. That's the most amazing part for me about writing fiction, is that I'll set up a situation where, in terms of a chapter, for example, I'll have an outline of where I want the chapter to go, maybe several points, because you really need to move things along. With that's the only structure I have. I'm not someone who writes all the way through and then comes back and writes again. I literally write as I go. The most that I do in preparation, other than doing research for things, would be to block out, for, as I said, maybe make 4 or 5 points throughout a chapter where I expect the action to go and certain things I want to happen, and then the characters go on their own. I really don't know what's going to happen. I honestly don't know where they're going to go, and that to me is the most fascinating and wonderful thing about writing for me, because they just take off on their own, and I sometimes look back and I go, I can't believe that she said that, but it's me, and I don't even think it's me anymore. So that's the best answer I can give you to that one. Say something? Oh, you have a question?
Hi, Jody. Really enjoyed the poem at the end as well.
Oh,
and in the Temple of Poetry, can we expect a little book on poems in the future, political poems?
Well, thank you very much. This is because the book is not political, obviously, and I'm sorry if if anybody didn't like what I said, but I just feel like we're all in this state right now. it's like a state of fugue, and sometimes it just has to come out. And I've always been writing poetry. I've never written a poetry book, and it's just when the thing moves me. I'm more a fan of long form or short stories. I do that a lot more, and I leave the poetry basically to all my friends who are the poets here, except for once in a while I'll sneak one in, and that's about it.
I have a question. Can you tell us?
Could you state your name, please?
Yes.
And your
I'm the wife of Jody Weiner. I want you to tell us the difference between writing the first book and the second one, the sequel, Crime Therapy, because I've noticed that you have a different process in the second book than you do the first, and I think that it's flowing in a different way than your first book did.
Oh yeah, tell me how. I want to learn something here. Explain to me what's different.
I just find that you're more focused in the second book, and the characters now are alive, so you're like dealing with real people, not just us, but your characters have manifest, and so I'm just wondering how that experience is for you.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. Thank you. The second part of your question is because the characters already existed at the end of the first book. I didn't have to, there are new stories, new characters are coming into it, but the two main characters are the anchor throughout the whole book. So I already have the foundation for doing it, so that's why it's smoother. And I just had to come up with, as you know, the plots that would go along with these folks. And that the minute you get that plot there, they just take off on their own. The first part of your question was, the second book is coming along easier because I've been paid for it.
Hi,
Dr. Perry?
hi, Richard Perry here, a.k.a. Lucky.
I've seen you around.
Yes, too. Seen you in the neighborhood somewhere, right? One of the things that occurred to me that I thought was very funny, I got a copy of his book, and I looked at the title, and I said, "The Other Right Hand." He goes, "Yeah," and tell him why they call it the other right hand.
Well, that's an old court thing. I mean, thanks for asking that question.
Yeah.
If you've ever been in court and the bailiff or the clerk or sometimes the judge will even say, "Stand and raise your right hand and repeat after me, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth?" And oftentimes people are so nervous or they're looking at you and it's a mirror image, so when they say raise your right hand, they'll raise their left hand. And the judge, not wanting to embarrass them, will say, "No, raise your other right hand." So that's where the title comes from. Thank you for the
That's
question.
a good one, yeah. I figured I'd get a laugh out of you.
What was your first writing class? How old were you?
I never took a writing class.
Oh.
No, I never take it. I mean, I will say, in law school, we did research in writing, and that's where I learned formulas for writing a brief, and and that was the discipline that Scott was talking about, but not the form, But it's also interesting because in writing a brief and arguing a case in court, you're telling a story. And whether it's a movie, it's a book, there's generally 3 acts to a play, there's 3 acts to a movie. And generally you're creating, even in court, you're trying to create a story and present it within the group of facts that exist so that people can understand it on the other end and you come out with reasonable doubt. So it's within the facts, of course. It's not like it is today where we don't know what the truth is anymore. But so that's basically, I didn't take a class in writing, but I did take a legal writing course. And I literally started writing fiction when I graduated from college, and before I went to law school, I went to Europe for a year. I was backpacking around, and because I wasn't ready to go to law school, and that's when I started writing. It was kind of an autobiography, but it was more like a journal. But I called it The Answer to Everyone because I was out there, and it never went anywhere. I never finished it, but that was the first time I actually had a feeling that there was something inside of me that I could get out there. That I didn't know whether anybody would listen to it, but I just found a way to get it out. And after practicing criminal law for 11 years in Chicago, I had got to the point where I had been burned out to some extent by it, because most of the people 95% of the people you represent are guilty in criminal cases. And the fact is, there is a real reason for having criminal defense lawyers to protect the Constitution. But if you get at all involved on any level emotionally, you feel like you're contributing not to society but against it. So it's like, the old saying, if you lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas. And I just had enough of it. And I think for therapy, I moved out here with the intention to write a novel, but it was also, I could get all that stuff out of me. So I think it was therapeutic, and that maybe was one of the best ways that I learned to write, was through
Thanks.
necessity.
I wanted to get to that emotional place
Yeah.
with you because I recall when I was a kid the first time that I got turned on to writing. So, I was wondering if you had that similar.
No, that was my connection, was to get that stuff out of me, because
Yeah,
it was,
cool.
I carried it around with me. Thank you.
So I think we have time for one more question. Okay.
Hi, Jody. I read your first book, Prisoners of Truth.
Wow. You're the only one?
I have not read this one yet, but I'm about to, and I'm excited. You talked about redemption today. It seems like a theme across both of the books. And aside from being in court and being someone who has to represent for the truth, it seems like you have something about the theme of redemption. And could you elaborate on that?
I don't know. I guess it's just a human trait that maybe that's something deep inside of me that I'm still trying to figure out. And so I'm still looking for that redemption. But I just feel like that's one theme, and I think that's a very important theme for all of us in life. So and it seems to me I keep coming back to that naturally. I can't say yes, that's what I'm doing. It just seems to be something that I tap into. And I think it's also, maybe it is related to my emotional connection to being in criminal law, and I'm looking to make people better. Because I've been, and I never thought about that before, but maybe that's part of it, is that there is, we are all good people underneath, hopefully, and sometimes we forget. And so to bring that back maybe that's what I'm trying to do. So thanks for that question. I'll think about that some more. And let me know when you finish it, what you think.
I can't think of a better place to begin the signing. Thank you, Jody, and thank you, Scott.
Thank you all.
Thank you
so
all
much.
for coming.